The station was dying. Everyone knew it. They could feel it in the way the floor shook with each explosion. They could see it in the flickering lights and hear it in the screaming alarms that never stopped. Ambassador stood at the command center window and watched another bright flash light up the darkness of space. That was another ship gone. Another group of brave pilots who had given their lives to buy a few more minutes, minutes that would not matter in the end. Hope was the name of this station. It hung in orbit above the colony world of Threshold 7, a planet that held 18 million people. Farmers, teachers, children, families, all of them looking up at the sky, wondering if help would come. Help was not coming. Had spent the last 3 days sending messages to every major power in the Galactic Coalition. He had begged for their famous fleet. They told him their ships were busy with other matters. He had pleaded with the Council. They sent their condolences and promised to remember Threshold 7 in their prayers. He had even contacted the Empire, the mightiest civilization in the known galaxy. They expressed deep concern and said they would discuss the matter at their next council meeting. That meeting was scheduled for next month. Captain walked up beside him. She was a small woman with tired eyes, but her voice remained steady. She had commanded the defense of this station for 3 days without sleep. Her uniform was wrinkled and stained with coffee, and there was a cut on her forehead that she had refused to let anyone treat. "We lost the patrol ship Sunrise," she said quietly. "Lieutenant and his crew. They took out 2 enemy vessels before they went down." Closed his eyes. "How many do we have left?" 6 ships against 47. The enemy was called They were a species known throughout the galaxy for one thing: destruction. They did not conquer planets to rule them. They did not take slaves or demand payment. They simply destroyed. They burned worlds to ash, took what resources they wanted, and moved on to the next target. The galaxy knew about The galaxy did nothing about them, because they were useful. They kept smaller civilizations afraid. They provided a threat that the great powers could point to when they wanted to justify their own military spending. As long as they only attacked the weak and the unimportant, the strong were happy to look away. Threshold 7 was weak and unimportant. A young officer named looked up from his station. He was barely 25 years old, fresh from the academy. This was supposed to be a quiet assignment, a place to learn the basics of space communication in a peaceful system far from any danger. "Ambassador," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "I have incoming transmissions from the flagship." Nodded, "Put it through." The screen flickered and a face appeared. It was not a pleasant face. There were tall creatures with skin stretched tight over sharp bones. They had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and when they spoke, rows of small teeth became visible behind thin lips. "Ambassador of the Coalition," the commander said. His name was, and he had destroyed 11 worlds. "Your defense is impressive for such a small force. We respect your warriors, but this changes nothing. In 6 hours we will breach your station. In 7 hours we will begin our harvest of the planet below." "These people have done nothing to you," said. "They are farmers, civilians. There is nothing of military value here." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Value? You misunderstand our purpose. We do not seek value. We seek to demonstrate truth. The truth that the universe belongs to the strong, that the weak exist only at our pleasure. Your coalition understands this truth. That is why they send you words instead of ships." The transmission ended. Captain was already giving orders to her remaining pilots. She was organizing another attack run, another desperate attempt to slow the enemy advance. She knew it was hopeless. They all knew, but they would fight anyway because that was all they could do. Returned to his desk and began composing another message. His 100th message. His 1000th. He wrote to the Coalition Council again, describing the situation in detail. He included images of the families on Threshold 7. He attached recordings of children asking when the bad ships would go away. He knew no one would respond, But he wrote anyway because that was all he could do. The hours passed slowly. Hope shook with each impact. Systems failed one by one. The station's shields, which had seemed so strong 3 days ago, were now operating at 12%. Emergency teams ran through corridors, sealing breaches and pulling wounded crew members to safety. Worked at his station without pause. His job was to monitor all communications, all signals, anything that might offer hope. He scanned every frequency. He listened for any sign that help might be coming. There was nothing. And then there was something. At first thought his equipment was broken. The readings made no sense. He was detecting a hyperspace signature, but it was wrong. Hyperspace signatures had patterns, frequencies that identified what type of ship was coming. Every species had their own pattern. Ships sang high and clear. Vessels rumbled low and deep. Engines screamed with harsh static. This signature did none of those things. It was completely different, alien in a way that had never experienced. "Captain," he said, his voice cracking, "I have something. A ship is coming out of hyperspace." Rush to his station. More. "No, the signature is wrong. It's coming from—" He checked the coordinates twice, then a third time. "It's coming from the dead zone, from human space." Everyone on the bridge stopped moving. Humans? The word seemed strange, almost mythical. Humans were the species to achieve faster-than-light travel. They had accomplished it only 40 years ago. They had made contact with the Coalition, exchanged basic information, and then retreated to their small corner of the galaxy. They had shown no interest in galactic politics, no desire to join the great civilizations. They were considered primitive, backward, irrelevant. What could humans possibly do here? The void tore open. Every sensor on the station screamed with data, and something emerged from hyperspace that made everyone who saw it take a step back in shock. It was a ship, but it was not like any ship the Coalition had ever recorded, where galactic vessels were smooth and elegant, designed for beauty as much as function. This thing was brutal. It was a mountain of angular metal, covered in armor plates and weapons. So many weapons. Gun turrets, missile pods, things that the station's computers could not even identify. The ship bore scars, hundreds of them, marks of impacts and repairs, evidence of battles fought somewhere far away. It was ugly and frightening and absolutely magnificent. Read the data scrolling across his screen. It's transmitting an identification code. The ship is called. Registry indicates Republic of Korea Space Navy, part of something called the United Earth Defense Coalition. Stared at the vessel on his display. He had studied humans during his diplomatic training. He knew about their history, their wars, their strange combination of cruelty and compassion. He had always dismissed them as interesting but unimportant. Looking at this ship, he began to think he had made a terrible mistake. Captain was the first to speak. "Can they help us?" Before anyone could answer, the human ship began to move. It accelerated toward the fleet at a speed that should have been impossible. And then a voice came through every speaker on the station, translated into perfect standard language. "This is Admiral of the ROKS. We are here to help. All civilian vessels, stay clear. All hostile forces, you have 60 seconds to withdraw." For the first time in 3 days, felt something strange in his chest. It was hope. Admiral stood on the bridge of her ship and looked at the battle ahead. She was 63 years old. Her hair was and cut short in military style. Her face was calm, showing nothing of what she felt inside. She had spent 40 years in the Navy. She had trained for war her entire adult life, but she had never fired a weapon at a living target. Today that would change. The bridge of the was not like the bridges on Coalition ships. There were no comfortable chairs, no soft lighting, no decorations. Everything was metal and function. Screens covered every wall, showing data from 100 different sensors. Officers sat at stations arranged in precise rows, each one focused on their specific task. Commander stood at her right side. He was her second in command, a man of 40 years who had the same calm expression as his admiral. He had also never seen real combat. None of them had. Humanity had not fought a war in over a century. But they had never stopped preparing for one. "Tactical report," said. Lieutenant answered from his station. He was young, maybe 30, with quick eyes that moved constantly across his displays. 47 hostile vessels, Admiral. Design. Weapons are directed energy and missile systems. Shields are present but primitive by our standards. The civilian station has taken heavy damage. Shields at 12%. They will breach in approximately 6 hours. And our status? All systems operational. Weapons charged, shields at maximum. The crew is ready. Nodded. She looked out the main viewport at the distant lights of the fleet. Each light was a ship. Each ship was a machine designed for killing. And behind those ships was a space station full of innocent people who were about to die. She thought about how they had come to be here. 3 weeks ago, humanity's long-range sensor network had detected unusual activity in this sector. They had watched the fleet gather. They had seen it attack. They had monitored the desperate calls for help from Threshold 7 and the empty responses from the Coalition. The decision to intervene had not been easy. Humanity had chosen isolation for good reasons. 40 years ago, when they first met the Coalition, they had asked a simple question: if humanity is threatened, will you help us? The Coalition had laughed. They had explained that the galaxy operated on power and self-interest. The strong survived. The weak were tolerated only as long as they remained useful. Humanity, they said, was too primitive, too small, too new to matter. So humanity had gone home and started building ships. They built ships in secret. They trained crews in hidden bases. They developed weapons that the Coalition said were impossible. They created sensor networks that could see halfway across the galaxy. And they waited. For 40 years they waited. Now they were done waiting. "Open a channel," said. "All frequencies. I want every ship in this system to hear this." Communications officer pressed several buttons. "Channel open, Admiral." Straightened her uniform. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. "This is Admiral of the Republic of Korea Space Navy vessel, representing the United Earth Defense Coalition. You are engaged in hostile action against civilians. You will cease fire immediately and withdraw from this system, or you will be destroyed. You have 60 seconds to comply." The response came quickly. A face appeared on screen, sharp teeth visible behind a cruel smile. "Human vessel," the commander said. "You are one ship, we are 47. You have traveled far to die. We will feast on your flesh and use your bones to decorate our—" Cut the transmission. She had heard enough. "They have made their choice," she said. "All hands battle stations, weapons free." The came alive. Warning lights flashed. Crew members rushed to their positions. The great engines of the ship roared as they pushed it forward, accelerating toward the enemy fleet. On the bridge began calling out targeting data. "Enemy formation is standard pattern. They are moving to encircle us. Range to nearest vessel, 40,000 kilometers. Weapons optimal range, 15,000. Take us through the center," ordered. "Maximum speed." Looked at her. "Admiral, that will put us in their crossfire." "Yes, it will also put them in ours." The ship accelerated faster. Coalition vessels could not do what they was doing now. Their crews could not survive such forces. But humans had spent centuries fighting wars on a single planet, learning to survive pressures that would kill other species. Their ships were built to match their resilience. The first weapons fire reached them. Energy beams struck the shields and the ship shook slightly, but the shields held. "Return fire," said. They responded. The primary weapons were: they used magnetic force to launch heavy metal projectiles at incredible speeds. No energy beam, no plasma bolt, just simple physics, mass times velocity. The projectiles left the ship and crossed the void in seconds. They struck the nearest vessel and went straight through it. The enemy ship exploded. First kill confirmed, reported, moving to secondary targets. The fleet was in chaos. They had expected the human ship to fight like coalition vessels. Those vessels would approach carefully, exchange fire at long range, seek to disable rather than destroy. The humans did none of those things. They charged directly into the formation, firing in all directions, taking hits and giving back worse. Missiles launched from the in waves. They were not ordinary missiles. They were smart weapons, designed to split into smaller warheads, to avoid defenses, to seek weak points in enemy armor. A single launch could become 100 separate attacks. Multiple impacts on enemy vessels, called out. Enemy shields are failing. They are not designed for this type of engagement. Watch the battle unfold on her tactical display. Red dots were disappearing. Each one was a ship dying. Each one was hundreds of enemy soldiers meeting their end. She felt nothing. Not joy, not sadness, not triumph. She had a job to do. Feeling would come later. The commander sent another transmission. This time his voice was different. There was something in it that had not been there before. Fear. Human vessel, this is not how war is conducted. You violate protocols. You must accept our surrender negotiations. Answered him, you gave us 60 seconds to respond. You chose violence. Now you will receive it. She ended the transmission. The battle continued. The push through the formation, weapons blazing. It took hits. Armor plates buckled. Systems failed and were quickly restored by repair teams. Crew members were injured and carried to medical bays, but the ship kept fighting. On the space station, Ambassador watched in shock. Captain stood beside him, equally stunned. They had both witnessed fleet battles before. They had seen the careful dance of starships, the measured exchange of fire, the lengthy negotiations for surrender. This was not that. This was something ancient and terrible. This was war as humans had practiced it for thousands of years, refined and perfected and brought to the stars. They are not accepting surrender, whispered. They are not giving thee any chance to withdraw. The said they had 60 seconds, replied. They wasted those seconds on threats and insults. Now they pay the price. Looked up from his station. His face was pale. The human ship has destroyed 19 vessels in the last 4 minutes, at this rate. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Gave orders in a calm voice as her ship tore through the enemy fleet. She was doing what humanity had prepared for. She was protecting people who could not protect themselves. Because someone had to. Because no one else would. In coalition space, naval engagements could take hours, sometimes days. Ships would exchange fire at great distances, carefully measuring their shots, preserving resources. Commanders would talk to each other, negotiate, seek terms. War was civilized. War had rules. Humans did not fight that way. They tore through the fleet like a storm through dry leaves. It moved with a speed and violence that they could not match. Their weapons hit the human ship again and again, but the shields held. Their missiles found their targets, but the armor absorbed the impacts. And every time they struck, the humans struck back harder. Called out the count from his tactical station. His voice remained steady, professional, even as the numbers grew impossible. 22 enemy vessels destroyed. 23, 24. Enemy formation is breaking. They are beginning to retreat. Admiral stood at the center of the bridge. She had not moved from her position since the battle began. Her hands were clasped behind her back, and her eyes watched the tactical display with absolute focus. Do not let them regroup, she said. Continue pursuit. They turned sharply, engines burning bright, and chased the fleeing ships. The humans had studied their enemy carefully. They knew that they operated on fear and dominance. If they were allowed to escape, they would return with more ships. They would bring friends. They would make humanity pay for this defeat. So there would be no escape. They spoke again and again. Each shot was precise, calculated, deadly. Ships died in bright flashes of light. Some tried to surrender, broadcasting distress signals and pleas for mercy. The humans did not respond. 60 seconds had been offered. 60 seconds had been refused. On the space station, Captain watched with her hand over her mouth. She was a soldier. She had trained for combat her entire career. She thought she understood what war meant. She had been wrong. "This is not a battle," she said quietly. "This is an execution." Ambassador nodded slowly. The humans asked them to withdraw. They refused. They chose this outcome. But the rules of engagement mean nothing to them. His voice was thoughtful, not angry. He was trying to understand. The humans never signed the coalition accords. They are not bound by our traditions. They fight by their own rules. Looked up from his station. The young officer was pale, his hands shaking slightly. "The fleet has been reduced to 16 vessels. They are retreating at maximum speed toward the edge of the system. The human ship is letting them go." Onda had made a decision. She could destroy all of them. Her ship was damaged but still functional. Her weapons had ammunition remaining. She could chase the survivors and end them. But she chose not to. "Hold position," she ordered. "Let them run." Commander looked at her questioningly. "Admiral, they need to tell others what happened here. They need to spread the word." Finally allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Let them go home and explain to their leaders how 47 ships lost to one. Let them describe what human weapons can do. Let them warn everyone who might think of attacking a helpless world while humans are watching." The surviving ships reached the edge of the system and jumped into hyperspace. They fled at maximum speed, leaving behind 31 destroyed vessels and the wreckage of their pride. They drifted in space, surrounded by debris. Its hull was with impact marks. Several sections were venting atmosphere, but it was alive, and so were the people it had protected. Turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel to the civilian station." Nodded. "Channel open." "Hope this is Admiral. The immediate threat has been eliminated. What is your status? How can we assist?" On the station, answered. His voice was unsteady. He had to stop and compose himself before speaking. "Admiral, on behalf of the 18 million people of Threshold 7, I thank you. Our station has taken significant damage. We have wounded. Our shields are failing. If you have any medical teams or engineering support, we are sending shuttles now. Our medical staff will assist your wounded. Our engineers will help stabilize your station. Admiral out." She ended the transmission and turned to damage report. Her executive officer read from his display. 14 crew members killed in action. 53 wounded, 12 critically. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 9, now sealed. Primary shield generator operating at 60%. Weapons systems functional but low on ammunition. Engines at full capability. 14 dead. Closed her eyes for a moment. She knew each of them by name. She had served with some of them for 20 years. They had families, children, lives that had ended in 11 minutes of violence. "Prepare a full casualty list," she said quietly. "I will write the letters to their families personally." The shuttles launched from and crossed the space to Hope. Human medical teams entered the station and immediately began treating the wounded. Human engineers examined the damaged systems and started repairs. They worked quickly and efficiently, saying little, asking no questions. Captain met the first shuttle when it docked. A human officer stepped out, a woman in her 30s with a medical kit in her hands. "Lieutenant Medical Corps," she said, "where are your wounded?" Led her to the medical bay. It was crowded with injured crew members, many of whom had been waiting hours for treatment. The station's medical staff was overwhelmed. Looked around the room and immediately began giving orders. More human medical personnel arrived behind her. They set up equipment, administered treatment, performed emergency procedures. They saved lives. One of the wounded was an alien, who had been serving as an advisor on the station. He had been caught in an explosion and had severe burns across his body. The station's doctors had done what they could, but physiology was complex. They did not expect him to survive. Examined him carefully. "I have studied medicine," she said. "We have the necessary equipment on our ship. I can save him." The station doctors stared at her. "You have studied alien medicine. Why?" Looked at them with a strange expression. It took the doctors a moment to recognize it as confusion. "Because we might need to help people someday. Why else would we study anything?" She arranged for that to be transported to the. He would survive, so would most of the others. Back on the bridge of the human ship, sat alone in her command chair. The battle was over. The wounded were being treated. The dead would be honored. The victory, if it could be called that, was complete. But she felt no joy. She had done what was necessary. She had protected innocent people from monsters. She had proven that humans were not weak, not primitive, not irrelevant. And she had killed thousands of beings who, however cruel, had been alive until she arrived. This was the burden of command. This was what her training had prepared her for, the ability to make terrible decisions and live with the consequences. She looked out the viewport at the debris field. Somewhere in that wreckage were the bodies of soldiers. Enemies, yes, but thinking beings. Creatures with hopes and fears and lives that had ended because of her orders. She would remember them. That was the least she could do. Approached her quietly. "Admiral, the Coalition is sending messages. They all want to know what happened here. They want to talk to you." Turned to look at him. They refused to help when help was needed. They watched and did nothing. Now they want to talk. "They are afraid, Admiral. They have never seen anything like what we did today." She was silent for a long moment. Then she stood. "Let them wait. We have wounded to treat and dead to mourn. The politicians can have their conversation later. Our people come first." She walked off the bridge, leaving behind the questions that would soon demand answers. 3 days after the battle, Admiral sat alone in her ready room. The small space was simple, almost empty. A desk, a chair, a viewport showing the stars. On the wall hung a single picture, a flower with soft pink petals. The rose of Sharon, the national flower of her homeland. On her desk were 14 letters. She had written each one by hand, the old way, with paper and ink. Each letter told a family that their loved one would not be coming home. Each letter tried to explain why their sacrifice had mattered. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. A knock came at her door. "Come in," she said. Commander entered, his face troubled. "Admiral, Ambassador is requesting a meeting. He has been asking for 3 days." "I know," sighed. "Send him in." Left, and a few minutes later the alien diplomat entered. Was tall and thin, with blue skin and large eyes that showed every emotion. Right now, those eyes held confusion and gratitude, and something that might have been awe. "Please sit," said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. Sat. For a moment neither spoke. "I have been trying to understand," the ambassador finally said. "I have been trying to find the logic in what you did. You crossed 40 light years. You risked your ship, your crew, your lives. For strangers. For people you had never met and will never see again." Looked at him steadily. "Yes." "Why?" It was such a simple question, such a hard answer. Stood and walked to the viewport. She looked out at the stars, countless points of light in the endless dark. 40 years ago," she said, "when humanity first made contact with the Coalition, we asked a question. We wanted to know, if something threatens our species, will you help us? Will you stand with us against danger?" Nodded slowly. "I have read the records of that meeting." "Then you know what they said. They laughed at us. They told us we were too small, too primitive, too unimportant. They said the galaxy operated on strength and self-interest. The weak had no right to expect help from the strong. She turned back to face him. We listened to that answer, we understood what it meant, and we went home and started preparing. Preparing for what? For the day when we would have to stand alone, when some threat would come for us and no one would help. We built ships. We trained soldiers. We developed weapons. We created sensor networks that could see threats coming from light years away. Returned to her chair. But as we prepared, we also thought, we discussed, we debated. If the galaxy truly worked the way the coalition said, then we had a choice to make. We could accept those rules. We could become strong, and when we were strong enough, we could start taking what we wanted from those weaker than us. That is what the galaxy expected. But you chose differently. We chose to ask a different question. Not what can we take, but what kind of species do we want to be? We had spent thousands of years fighting each other, hurting each other, learning the worst lessons that violence could teach. We knew what it meant to be cruel. We knew what it meant to prey on the weak. His voice grew softer. We also knew what it meant to be helpless, to cry for help and hear nothing, to watch those we loved suffer while the powerful looked away. Every human knows that feeling. It is written into our history. So you decided to help others. We decided that if we ever had the power to prevent suffering, we would use it, not for reward, not for gratitude, not for political advantage, simply because it was right, because we remembered what it felt like to have no one come when we needed them. Was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Do you know what the coalition thinks of you now? Smiled without humor. They are afraid. Terrified. I have received hundreds of messages. Every major power wants to know your intentions. They want to know if you plan to conquer, to expand, to challenge their authority. They cannot understand a species that fights without seeking gain. And what do you think? The ambassador considered his answer carefully. I think that you have shown us something we had forgotten, something that many of us, perhaps most of us, never knew at all. What is that? That kindness can be strong, that mercy can come from power rather than weakness, that the universe does not have to be what we have made it. Nodded. The flower on my wall, she said, pointing to the picture, is called in my language. It means eternal flower that never fades. It is a symbol of my homeland, a small country on Earth that faced many invaders over many centuries. Again and again, larger powers tried to destroy us. Again and again, we survived. Not because we were the strongest, but because we refused to stop fighting, because we believed we had a right to exist. She looked at the flower with something like love in her eyes. I named this ship after that flower. I wanted our enemies to know that we will not fade, we will not surrender, and we will never become the thing we hate. Stood slowly. I must report to the Coalition Council. They will want to know everything about this encounter. They will ask many questions. Tell them the truth. Tell them we came because we could not stand by and watch innocent people die. Tell them we ask nothing in return. And tell them that we will be watching, not to threaten but to help. Wherever people cry for aid and receive none, we will consider responding. That will frighten them even more. Smiled again, and this time there was warmth in it. Good. Perhaps fear will teach them what compassion could not. After the ambassador left, entered again. He carried with the latest reports. The repairs are proceeding well. We should be able to depart within 2 days. The station is stable, and the colony below is sending messages of thanks. They want to name a holiday after us. Tell them that is not necessary. We did not come for recognition. I told them. They insisted. He paused. There is also a personal message for you from Earth, from your daughter. His expression softened. Read it. Looked at the Mom, I heard what happened. I am so proud of you. I always knew you were brave, but now the whole galaxy knows it too. Please come home safe. I love you. Was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. Tell her I love her too. Tell her I will be home soon, and tell her that everything I do for her, and for everyone who deserves to live without fear." She looked out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, her daughter, her home. She had left them behind to cross the void and save strangers. And she would do it again, as many times as necessary, for as long as she lived. Because that was what it meant to be human. 3 months after the Battle of Threshold 7, Ambassador stood before the Coalition High Council. The chamber was enormous. It had been built to hold representatives from 200 species, and today every seat was filled. Diplomats with their shimmering scales, scholars in their flowing robes, commanders in their dark armor, and dozens of others, creatures of every shape and size, all watching with intense focus. Behind him, a holographic image of the rotated slowly. The ship looked exactly as it had after the battle, damaged, defiant. The humans had refused to repair the battle marks. They said they wanted to remember. Took a deep breath and began to speak. "Council members, I stand before you to deliver a report on the events at Threshold 7. You have all seen the recordings. You have all read the data. You know what happened. One human ship destroyed 31 vessels in 11 minutes. One ship saved 18 million lives." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "But you did not bring me here to discuss facts. You brought me here to discuss fear, because that is what you feel. Every one of you is afraid of humanity now." A representative rose. "Ambassador, your words are inflammatory. We are not here to—" "You are here to understand," interrupted. "So let me help you understand." He walked forward, closer to the main viewing platform where the senior council members sat. "For 3 days I sent messages begging for help. I contacted every major power in this room. I described the situation. I showed you images of families about to die. I pleaded for intervention." His voice grew harder. "And every one of you refused. They said your fleet was busy. They offered prayers. The promise to discuss the matter at your next council meeting, a meeting scheduled for a month later." "The situation was complex," a commander said. "They are a recognized power. Intervening would have had political consequences. 18 million people were going to die." His voice echoed through the chamber. "Children were going to be murdered while you calculated political consequences." He turned away from them, taking a moment to compose himself. When he spoke again, his voice was calmer but no less powerful. "The humans did not ask about politics. They did not consider consequences. They saw people in danger and they came, 40 light years, through territory they had never traveled, against an enemy they had never fought. They came because they could not stand by and watch innocent people die." He looked around the chamber. "And now you want to know their intentions. You want to know if they plan to conquer, if they plan to expand, if they plan to challenge your authority." A small laugh escaped him. "You cannot imagine a species that would fight without seeking gain. It does not fit your understanding of the universe, so you assume they must want something: land, resources, power. Face the council directly. The humans have asked me to deliver a message. I will now speak their words exactly as they gave them to me." He straightened his posture, his voice becoming formal. "We do not want your alliance. We do not want your technology. We do not want your thanks. We want to be left alone to live in peace, as we have wanted since we first met you 40 years ago." The chamber was utterly silent. "But we cannot ignore suffering. We cannot watch helpless people die while the powerful do nothing. It goes against everything we believe. So we offer you this truth. We are watching. Our sensors reach across the galaxy. We see what happens in the dark places, the forgotten places, the places where no one else looks. Wherever people cry for help and receive none, we will consider responding, not as conquerors, not as masters, simply as those who refuse to let cruelty go unanswered." Paused, then delivered the final words. You have spent 10,000 years building a civilization based on the principle that the strong ignore the weak. We reject that principle. We believe the strong have a duty to protect the weak. We will act on that belief, whether you approve or not. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted questions and accusations. Some demanded that humanity be declared a threat. Others argued for immediate diplomacy. The representative screamed that this was an act of war. Ignored them all. He had one more thing to say. There is a phrase that has spread across the galaxy since the battle, a phrase that the survivors of Threshold 7 keep repeating. 3 simple words that describe what they felt before they arrived. He looked around the chamber, meeting eyes that could not hold his gaze. No help was coming. That has been true for 10,000 years. Every species that could not protect itself has lived with that knowledge. Every population facing destruction has known that the great powers would watch and do nothing. Began walking toward the exit. His steps were slow and deliberate. But things change. The humans have shown us that things can change. They have shown us that courage exists, that compassion exists, that strength does not have to mean cruelty. He reached the door and turned for a final look at the assembled powers of the galaxy. The humans named their ship. It is a flower from there, a flower that blooms no matter the conditions, no matter the hardship. They chose that name for a reason. No help was coming. For 10,000 years that was true, but help is coming now, whether you want it or not. The doors closed behind him. Far away, in orbit around a small blue planet called Earth, the rested in a repair dock. Its hull was being restored. Its weapons were being reloaded. Its crew was being given time to heal and mourn and prepare. Admiral stood at a viewport in her quarters, looking down at the world below. She could see the coastline of Korea, the land of her ancestors. She could see the city lights spreading across the darkness like stars on the ground. Her daughter visited that day. She was a young woman now, with her mother's strong chin and her father's kind eyes. They sat together and drank tea and talked about nothing in particular. "Are you afraid," her daughter asked, "about what comes next?" Considered the question. The coalition was afraid of humanity now. Some wanted to destroy them. Others wanted to make alliances. The political situation was complicated and dangerous. "No," she finally said, "I am not afraid." "Why not?" "Because we have already decided what kind of species we want to be. We have already chosen our path. Whatever comes next, we will face it as we have always faced challenges, together, with courage, with compassion." She looked at her daughter with love in her eyes. The galaxy spent 10,000 years teaching itself that kindness is weakness. We are going to spend the next 10,000 teaching it otherwise. It will not be easy. It may not even be possible, but we have to try. Because if we do not, who will? Her daughter smiled. "No one, I guess." "Exactly," took her daughter's hand. No one was going to help those people on Threshold 7. No one was going to stand up to no one was going to show the galaxy that there is another way. So we did. So we did, and we will keep doing it. As long as there are people who need help and powers that refuse to provide it, we will be there. That is who we are now. That is who we chose to be. Outside the viewport, the stars shone cold and distant, but they no longer seemed quite so dark, because somewhere out there, among all those points of light, a message was spreading. A message about a single ship that crossed the void to save strangers. A message about a species that fought for no reward except the knowledge that they had done right. No help was coming. But help had come anyway. And the galaxy would never be the same.